You won't believe what my own daughter said to me at the dinner table. Her pension should be ours. And what happened next left my whole family in shock. What would you do if your own family tried to take away everything you worked for? Don't miss a second, because the twist at the end will leave you speechless. So there I was, apron tied tight around my waist, hair a little wild from the steam of the kitchen, but feeling that deep down satisfaction only a home-cooked meal and a house full of family can bring. I'd spent the whole afternoon fussing over the roast, making sure the potatoes were just the right kind of fluffy, and even whipped up my famous green bean casserole, extra crispy onions on top, just the way the grandkids like it. The house was filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the kind of warmth that only comes from being surrounded by the people you love most. I looked around my dining room, at the faces I'd watched grow up, and thought, this is what all those years of hard work were for. You see, I'd worked my whole life, double shifts at the hospital, weekends at the diner, and more than a few nights falling asleep with my shoes still on. I'd pinched pennies, skipped vacations, and said no to myself more times than I could count. Also, I could say yes to my family. And now finally I had a little nest egg, a pension I could actually enjoy. Maybe a trip to the beach, or just a few quiet mornings with a good book and a cup of coffee that didn't come from a break room vending machine. Life was good, or so I thought. Just as I was about to sit down and take my first bite, my daughter, my own flesh and blood, the one I'd rocked to sleep and bandaged scraped knees for, cleared her throat. She stood up, fork in hand, and with a look that said she'd been rehearsing this speech for days, she said, "Mom, don't you think your pension would be better used by us? We've got bills, kids, and you don't really need all that money, do you?" I nearly choked on my green beans. For a second I thought I'd misheard her. Maybe she was joking, or maybe I'd finally lost my hearing after all those years of listening to the grandkids' cartoons at full blast. But no, she was serious, dead serious. And as I looked around the table, I realized she wasn't alone. My son-in-law, who still can't fix a leaky faucet without calling me for help, was nodding along like a bobblehead. My other daughter, who's never met a sale she didn't like, was already calculating how many new shoes she could buy. Even the grandkids, bless their hearts, were eyeing me with that hopeful look that usually means they want ice cream for dessert. Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? Like you're just the ATM with an apron, the one who keeps the lights on and the fridge full, but never really gets seen for who you are. That's exactly how I felt in that moment. I smiled, because that's what moms do, but inside, I was boiling. I wanted to stand up and shout, "Are you kidding me? After all I've done, you want to take the one thing I've worked my whole life for?" But instead, I just sat there, my hands shaking a little as I passed the breadbasket. I glanced at my husband's old chair, empty now, but still a presence at the table. He would have had a thing or two to say about all this, let me tell you. Probably something about kids these days, and hard work builds character. I could almost hear his voice in my head, telling me to stand my ground. But in that moment, all I could do was swallow hard and try to keep the peace. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I heard snippets of conversation, my daughter talking about her mortgage, my son-in-law complaining about daycare costs, my other daughter lamenting the price of gas. All valid concerns, sure, but none of them seemed to remember that I'd had those same worries once too. That I'd juggled bills and scraped by, all without ever asking my own parents for a dime. I wanted to remind them that I'd earned every penny of that pension, that it wasn't some magical pot of gold just waiting to be divvied up. But instead, I just kept serving. More potatoes, more gravy, more of myself, as always. I laughed at the right moments, nodded sympathetically, and even managed to dish out seconds without flinging mashed potatoes across the room, though trust me, I was tempted. Have you ever wanted to just let loose and see what would happen if you stopped being the nice mom for once? I'll admit, the thought crossed my mind. After everyone had eaten their fill and the plates were cleared, I stood at the sink, hands deep in soapy water, replaying the conversation over and over in my head. Was I being selfish? Was it wrong to want something for myself after all these years? Or was it finally time to draw a line in the sand and remind my family that respect goes both ways? As I dried the last dish and turned off the kitchen light, I made a decision. Maybe it was time for a little lesson in gratitude. Maybe, Just maybe, they needed to see what life would be like without Mom always there to pick up the pieces. I went to bed that night with a heavy heart, but also a spark of determination. Because if there's one thing I've learned in all my years, it's that sometimes the best way to teach is to let them learn the hard way. And oh, were they about to learn. That night, after the last dish was dried and the house had finally gone quiet, I found myself lying in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. The moonlight crept through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the room, but my mind was anything but peaceful. My heart was still pounding from dinner, and my daughter's words echoed in my ears. Her pension should be ours. I kept replaying the scene, wondering if I'd somehow misunderstood, or if maybe I was just being too sensitive. Was I being selfish for wanting to keep what I'd worked so hard for? Should I just hand over my hard-earned money and let them use it as they pleased? The questions swirled around in my head, refusing to let me rest. I thought back to all those years of double shifts at the hospital, coming home with aching feet and a sore back, but still managing to put dinner on the table. Years of missed vacations, watching friends post pictures from sunny beaches while I clipped coupons at the kitchen table. Years of saying no to myself so I could say yes to my kids. New shoes for them, hand-me-downs for me. Birthday parties, school trips, braces, and college funds, all paid for with love and sacrifice. I remembered the nights I'd stayed up late, worrying about how to stretch $1 just a little further, and the mornings I'd gotten up early to make sure everyone had what they needed before I headed out the door. I'd done it all without complaint, because that's what mothers do. But now, as I lay there in the dark, I couldn't help but wonder if any of it had really been appreciated. I turned over, fluffing my pillow, but sleep still wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself thinking about respect, how it's earned, not given, and how sometimes the people closest to us are the quickest to forget that. I thought about my own parents, how they'd taught me the value of hard work and the importance of standing on your own 2 feet. They'd never handed me anything on a silver platter, and I'd never expected them to. I'd learned to be independent, to make do with what I had, and to be grateful for every little thing. Had I failed to teach my own children those same lessons? Had I made things too easy for them, always swooping in to save the day? A little voice in my head whispered, "If they can't respect you, maybe it's time for a little lesson." I smiled to myself. Just a little, thinking about how my mother used to say, "Sometimes you've got to let them fall so they learn how to get back up." It wasn't easy, but it was true. And let's be honest, sometimes you've got to shake things up to get your point across. Ever had to teach your grown kids a lesson? It's not for the faint of heart. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and I knew there'd be tears, and maybe even a few slammed doors, but I also knew it was necessary. I wasn't just fighting for my pension. I was fighting for my dignity, for the respect I deserved after a lifetime of giving. I got up and padded quietly to the kitchen, making myself a cup of chamomile tea. The house was so still, it almost felt like I was the only person in the world. I sat at the table, hands wrapped around my mug, and started to make a plan. I thought about what I could do to help them see things from my perspective, to help them understand that money isn't just about paying bills. It's about security, independence, and the freedom to finally put myself first for once. I thought about what it would mean to step back, to let them handle things on their own, and to show them that I wasn't just a safety net they could fall back on whenever they wanted. I'll admit, I was scared. What if they got angry? What if they stopped talking to me? What if I ended up alone, with no one to share my golden years with? The fear was real, but so was the excitement. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of something new, a sense of possibility, of taking control of my own life. I realized that I'd spent so many years putting everyone else first that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up for myself. Maybe it was time to remember. I finished my tea and went back to bed, feeling a little lighter. I knew what I had to do. The next day, I'd call a family meeting. No more tiptoeing around the issue, no more pretending everything was fine. I'd lay it all out on the table. My feelings, my fears, and my expectations. I'd let them know that my pension wasn't up for grabs, and that if they wanted my help, they'd have to start showing me the respect I deserved. I'd remind them that I was more than just a bank account. I was their mother, and I'd earned the right to enjoy the fruits of my labor. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and I knew there'd be bumps along the way, but I also knew that I was doing the right thing. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that matter most, and as the first light of dawn crept through the window, I was ready to teach it. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. No more tossing and turning, no more second-guessing myself. I brewed a strong cup of coffee, none of that weak stuff my daughter likes, and sat at the kitchen table, waiting for everyone to wake up. The house was quiet, but I could hear the familiar sounds of my family starting their day. The thud of little feet running down the hallway, the clatter of cereal bowls, and the low hum of my son-in-law grumbling about the lack of cream cheese for his bagel. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and called out, "Family meeting, living room, now." No pot roast, no pie. No sweet treats to soften the blow, just me, my coffee, and a look that said, "Don't mess with Mama." They shuffled in, one by one, looking confused and a little nervous. My daughter tried to flash me her best, "I'm your favorite" smile, but I wasn't having it. My son-in-law looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, and the grandkids, bless their hearts, just wanted to know if this was going to interfere with their Saturday morning cartoons. I waited until everyone was settled, then set my coffee down with a little more force than necessary. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting to see what this was all about. I started calmly, my voice steady but firm. "I want to talk about what happened at dinner last night," I said, looking each of them in the eye. "About my pension and about respect." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "If you think my pension is up for grabs, maybe you should try living without it." I could see the confusion on their faces, so I decided to make it crystal clear. "So I've decided to take a little vacation. The house? Locked. The fridge? Empty. The bills? Yours. You should have seen their faces." My daughter's jaw dropped so fast I thought it might hit the floor. My son-in-law turned pale, like he'd just seen a ghost, or maybe the grocery bill. The grandkids looked at each other wide-eyed, and the oldest whispered, "Does this mean no Wi-Fi?" I almost laughed, but I kept my poker face. I wanted them to really feel it, to understand that I wasn't just making idle threats. I explained that I'd already made arrangements. I'd booked myself a little getaway, a cozy bed and breakfast by the lake, with nothing but peace, quiet, and a stack of books to keep me company. No cooking, no cleaning, no running to the store for last-minute snacks. Just me, finally taking the time to enjoy the retirement I'd worked so hard for. "You'll have to figure things out on your own," I said. "The mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, all of it. Consider it a crash course in adulthood." At first they tried to argue. My daughter insisted she hadn't meant it like that, and my son-in-law mumbled something about just being stressed. But I stood my ground. "I love you all," I said, "but love doesn't mean letting you walk all over me. I've spent my whole life putting your needs first. Now it's time for you to stand on your own 2 feet." The room was silent. I could see the wheels turning in their heads as they realized I was serious. My daughter looked like she might cry, and my son-in-law started calculating how much was left in their checking account. The grandkids, meanwhile, were already plotting how to convince their parents to order pizza for dinner. I almost felt bad, but I knew this was a lesson they needed to learn. I spent the rest of the morning packing my bags, humming to myself as I folded clothes and tucked away my favorite slippers. I could hear them in the kitchen, arguing about who was going to do the dishes and how much milk was left in the fridge. It was almost funny, watching them scramble to figure out the basics of running a household, things I'd done for years without a second thought. I left a note on the counter, just in case they needed a reminder. Remember, respect isn't just a word. It's how you treat the people who love you. As I loaded my suitcase into the car, my daughter came running out, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, please don't go," she begged. "We need you." I hugged her, holding her tight, but I didn't waver. "You'll be fine," I said gently. "You're stronger than you think. And when I get back, we'll talk about what it means to be a family." Driving away, I felt a mix of emotions, fear, excitement, and a little bit of guilt. But mostly I felt proud that I'd finally stood up for myself, proud that I was teaching my family a lesson they'd never forget. I spent the next few days relaxing by the lake, reading, and enjoying the peace and quiet. I checked my phone every now and then, but I resisted the urge to call home. I wanted them to figure things out on their own. By the time I returned, the house was still standing, but it looked like a tornado had blown through. The kids were exhausted, the fridge was empty, and my daughter greeted me with a hug and a sheepish smile. "We missed you, Mom," she said. "And we're sorry. We didn't realize how much you do for us." I smiled, knowing that sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that matter most. And as I unpacked my bags, I knew that things would never be quite the same again. By the end of that first day, reality hit my family like a cold shower in the middle of winter. No more free rides, no more Mom will fix it, and certainly no more bottomless cookie jars or magically refilled milk cartons. The house, which had always run like a well-oiled machine under my watchful eye, suddenly felt like a ship without a captain. My daughter, who'd always assumed dinner would appear on the table at 6 sharp, was now staring at a pantry full of ingredients she didn't know what to do with. My son-in-law, who'd never paid a utility bill in his life, was frantically Googling how to keep the lights on. And the grandkids? Well, they were just trying to figure out why the Wi-Fi kept going out and why nobody could find their soccer uniforms. Let me tell you, it was the quietest group text I've ever seen. No more requests for rides, no more "Mom, can you help?" Just radio silence, and I imagine a lot of head-scratching. The first few days were a comedy of errors. I heard later that my daughter tried to make my famous meatloaf and ended up with something that looked more like a science experiment gone wrong. The smoke alarm went off twice, and the dog wouldn't touch dinner. My son-in-law, bless his heart, tried to do laundry and managed to turn all the whites a lovely shade of pink. The grandkids, who'd always thought the laundry fairy was real, were suddenly out of clean socks and had to wear mismatched ones to school. I could picture the chaos, and I'll admit, it brought a little smile to my face as I sipped my coffee by the lake, finally enjoying a moment of peace. But as the days went on, the reality of running a household started to sink in. The bills didn't pay themselves, the groceries didn't magically appear, and the house didn't clean itself. My family, who'd always relied on me to keep everything running smoothly, had to learn the hard way what it meant to be responsible. There were arguments over who was supposed to take out the trash, tears over burnt dinners, and more than a few late-night calls to take-out restaurants. The grandkids even tried to bribe their parents for extra screen time, but without Wi-Fi, their efforts were in vain. A week later, I came home to a very different family. The house was a little messier than I'd left it, and everyone looked a little more tired, but there was a new sense of appreciation in the air. My daughter met me at the door, her eyes red from crying but her arms open wide. "Mom, we're sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "We didn't realize how much you do for us. We thought it was easy, but it's not. We took you for granted, and we're so sorry." My son-in-law nodded, looking sheepish, and even the grandkids gave me hugs, promising to help out more around the house. I hugged them all, my heart full, but my resolve still strong. "I love you all," I said, "but respect goes both ways. I've spent my whole life taking care of you, and I'll always be here when you need me. But my pension? That's for me. I worked hard for it, and I deserve to enjoy it. And maybe, just maybe, I'll share a little with the grandkids, if they behave." That got a laugh, and I could see the relief on their faces. The tension that had been hanging in the air melted away, replaced by a new understanding. Over the next few days, things slowly returned to normal, but with a few important changes. My daughter started helping out more in the kitchen, asking for my recipes, and actually listening when I explained how to make gravy without lumps. My son-in-law took over the bills, learning how to budget and even finding a few ways to save money. The grandkids pitched in with chores, and I made sure to reward them with extra cookies, just not too many. The house felt more like a team effort, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly appreciated. Looking back, I realized that sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that stick. My family had to struggle a little, to feel the weight of responsibility, before they could really understand what I'd done for them all those years. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I doubted myself, but in the end, it was worth it. I got my respect, my peace of mind, and a little more freedom to enjoy the retirement I'd earned. And as for my pension, well, it's still mine, tucked away for rainy days and the occasional treat. I use it for things that make me happy: a new book, a day at the spa, or a trip to visit old friends. I still help out when I can, but now it's on my terms, and my family knows better than to take me for granted. We laugh more, love more, and appreciate each other in ways we never did before. So, if you ever find yourself feeling invisible, or like your hard work isn't being appreciated, remember this: sometimes you have to step back and let them learn. It's not easy, but it's worth it. And who knows, you might just find a little more happiness for yourself along the way. So, ladies, have you ever had to teach your family a lesson? Or maybe you've got a story that tops mine? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And if you want more real-life stories, laughs, and a little wisdom from someone who's been there, hit that subscribe button. Because around here, we serve up more than just pot roast. We serve up the truth.